the Israelites from today's first reading were surely hearing what God was communicating to them, but that's the problem. They weren't putting into practice what they have heard. On the contrary, their minds and hearts were stubborn and closed to the truth given to them from above, from God. And that's what led them to this horrific hole of self-pity. And instead of realizing that only God can do a comfort and peace in their hearts, they start complaining, saying, you know what? This is God who is unfair. This is his fault. Friends, the words we hear today in the first reading are quite concerning, I have to say. God communicates to the prophet Ezekiel the words of a really great importance. God says, "You say, the way of the Lord is unfair. Hear now, O house of Israel, is my way unfair? Is it not your ways that are unfair?" And as if it's not enough, God speaks to them even more directly. When the righteous turns away from their righteousness and commit iniquity, they shall die for it. And for the iniquity that they have committed, they shall die. Again, when the wicked turn away from the wickedness they have committed and do what is lawful and right, they shall save their life. You know, rather than going back to today's gospel, I'd like to suggest that we rather pause at today's first reading, even though it is a bit unsettling. But first, we shall look more closely at the particular time and the situation in which the prophet Ezekiel and the Israelites of his time lived. You see, the people of God, the Israelites, throughout the ages, they faced many persecutions and exiles. Multiple nations invaded them. These nations were Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, Persia, Greece, finally also Rome in Jesus' times. And during those hardships, those persecutions, God always encouraged his people to renew their faith in him. He sent many messengers to speak on his behalf. And we know 4 of those major prophets were Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, each of them responding to a singular crisis: God's people who are not listening to God's voice. Simple as that. The exile they are now in is not the first one. The first one after the Egyptians that were attacked by the Assyrians, who scattered and destroyed completely most of Israel. They are 10 tribes in the north. But even then, the Israelites, they still didn't listen. They didn't keep the Sabbath day as the holy one. They didn't keep God's holy feasts. Their leaders, most of them were corrupt. They didn't let the land to rest, but rather they were exploiting it for their own benefit. And that's why the prophet Isaiah says that there will be another exile, and there it comes. Israelites are invaded again, this time by the Babylonians. And they are physically taken away from their country, from the presence of God in Jerusalem temple, to be put in a foreign and ungodly land and nation. They abandoned God in their hearts long before, but now they don't see his presence with their own eyes anymore. And so it also happens in a foreign land, in Babylonia, that they hear the most terrifying news in the life of their nation, that the holiest place of their nation is now gone, that the Jerusalem temple is wiped off from the face of the earth. And that had happened in the year 586 before Jesus Christ was born. And that event, that situation is at the very core of the message we hear today from God through Ezekiel the prophet. At the first glance of today's reading, it seems as if God is punishing his people for not obeying his commands. And certainly there is something to it. But more than God being mad at those who do not listen to his word, to him, it's just a very sad consequence of their own free choices. Because for a long time before this terrible exile in a foreign land, and before the very sad fall of God's temple in Jerusalem, God was trying again and again and again to rekindle in them the fire of love towards Yahweh, the Creator, the Lord. And that is why this prayer, Shema Israel, is so important. Shema Israel, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And as for you, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, as we remember from the book of Deuteronomy, and as Jesus teaches the prayer as well. In Hebrew word Shema means pay attention to, focus on. Shema means not only to listen to, but also to hear. And that's why in many Psalms we can find the beginning of words towards God, Shema my voice, O God, listen to my voice, O Lord. Shema finally means not only to listen, to hear, but also to act. That's why when God asked his people to Shema, to listen, he asked them also to obey. And as I read somewhere about this beautiful word, in the Bible, listening and doing are the sides of the very same coin. And so the Bible teaches that listening to someone is also giving a respect to what one is saying to you, and also doing what they say. The Israelites from today's first reading were surely hearing what God was communicating to them, but that's the problem. They weren't putting into practice what they have heard. On the contrary, their minds and hearts were stubborn and closed to the truth given to them from above, from God. That's what led them to this horrific hole of self-pity. And instead of realizing that only God can do a comfort and peace in their hearts, they start complaining, saying, you know what, this is God who is unfair. This is his fault. To that, God responds today in the first reading through Ezekiel with very compassionate yet objective words. When the righteous turns away from their righteousness, they shall die for it. But when the wicked turns away from the wickedness and do what is lawful, what is right, they shall save their lives. You see now, the history of Israelites, their history shows us that nothing is more deadly to us, Christians, than turning away from God by not listening to his word, but by going a separate way. Then even if we still occupy our formal address, we actually move away because our hearts start to drift, to wander towards an exile, a foreign land. But here is the good news. Even when we choose wrong, our compassionate Father gives us the remedy to come back, to be close to him again. And it is the trust, to trust in his love, because he loves you, and therefore you should trust that his word is given to you, to me, out of love. And his commands are not oppressive, or some oppressive rules to obey, but rather they are the signs of God's parental care, his guidance through the difficulties and dangers of this world. Shema Israel, listen, my people, The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And as for you, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my Sunday sermon, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to share it with others. God bless you.